So hello everybody, and thank you for watching today. Today we're talking about the important topic, how to protect your profits when prices keep on rising. My name is Jo Mulgrew, and I am the Group Operations Director here at HBXL. And here is my colleague, Matt Allen, who is a very experienced account manager who has been with HBXL for over 8 years, I believe. Is that right, Matt?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun. And he has had conversations with literally thousands and thousands of building firms, just like yours. And the problems are very similar across all firms. They usually allude to things like there's just not enough hours in the day. They are crazily busy all the time. Margins are really tight at the best of times, I guess, Matt, from the conversations you're having. And just very hectic working lives in general, juggling jobs and places to be, combined with lots of paperwork, that's quoting in the evenings, on weekends, obviously health and safety, the impact of planning on the work that you're doing, and just generally firefighting problems, the unexpected popping up each day on site. And unfortunately, right now, we're hearing that there's a new set of problems that firms are experiencing, and that's the fact that prices keep on rising, particularly materials pricing, and it is really hard to stay on top of these and predict where they're going to be at the start of the next job. So not only material prices rising, but materials, plant and labour rather, and obviously their availability. I know, Matt, you're having a project on your home, and gosh, the problems that you've been experiencing getting stuff to site has been causing difficulties. I know. So why is this? Well, we've obviously got this labour shortage compounded by Brexit, COVID, and generally low numbers into apprenticeships. And obviously topping all of this price inflation off with a cherry is COVID compliance. And I do realise, obviously, now when we're talking about COVID compliance within the workplace and on site, obviously things have opened up in July, but it is still really prudent to manage things carefully, so you don't get whole teams off isolating, even if that's just with mild symptoms because they've been vaccinated. You still got to isolate. So it's important that we make sure that we're managing it still. And obviously, a percentage of the population hasn't been vaccinated, and your clients, if you're in people's homes, particularly. So we've obviously got to be mindful of this. So it just adds to the joy of all the things, all the worry, all the stress running your business. And all of this is having this impact on the price of work. So the question is this: how do you actually quote? How do you price for work when the market has been so volatile? Big question. We get asked about this a lot. So, do you guess at material prices? Clearly, the answer should be no. Do you accept that you're locked into quotes? Do you think have your fingers crossed that prices are going to go down? And I want to add a bit of a background to this. The economy slowed up sharply in July 21, even though the market opened up. So you'd have expected things would kind of like bounce back, but really they'd already done that in the run up to July. So all this work that everyone's got booked up into 2022, which is great, good news for everybody, it's likely to slow up, and we can't take the recovery for granted as we go through 2022. So the initial kind of bounce back was experienced early in the year. We've now got this slow up with the upsurge in cases in the UK. That's obviously likely over the autumn. And we've obviously got the supply chain crisis on top of which compounding those figures. So the pattern seemed to be UK saw rapid initial bounce back from the mere economic act of opening up the economy, but it's going to be tricky as we go through the rest of this year as the pandemic support, furlough, etc. is phased out, and the self-employed support, if you were lucky enough to get that sorted. And obviously we're going to just keep having this impact of labour shortages and trade problems with deliveries and what have you. So I think the talk of a boom was rather premature. That's what all the economists are saying. So number one, work's not assured going into 2022, sorry, from 21. But we've got to kind of guess, I guess, at what that is going to have impact-wise on your pricing for next year. So back to this important question then of how do you cost for the future work when the future is so unpredictable and the market is, let's call it, volatile. And as I was saying, do you guess at those prices? Do you accept that you're locked into those quotes? Cross your fingers. And I'm hoping that all of you are going to say no to all of those. Construction cost inflation is the highest of a generation. What's a generation? That is 20 to 30 years. We're experiencing really significant price inflation. So to put that into perspective, I thought I'd just explain that 20 to 30 year high. It's massive this year. And as you go into next year, that's going to continue. So pricing for work into 2022 is a good thing. Clearly, we want work lined up. But are you taking account in your 2022 quotes of the likely impact as we go forwards? And do you have the flexibility of a contract in place which is going to allow you to adjust the price of the work before you start nearer the time? So I'm sure this is a bit of a basic thing to say, but rising prices, inflation, that is going to neutralize any of the money, the profits that you earn from the building work that you have taken on. And to judge how much money you're really making, you need to take inflation into account at worst, but at best account for it in your original quote, because you might be surprised that if you quoted a few months ago for a job to start in 2022, that you're actually going to not make any money on it. Worst case, you're going to be making a loss. Just summarising on those couple of points, because I know I've touched on a lot. Are your 2022 quotes accounting for inflation, and have you got contracts in place to adjust them? And if the answer is no, you need to keep listening. So taking account of inflation is not as straightforward as slapping 10% on the job price or whatever figure you might guess at. It's a bit more complicated than that. And I should add that this generational increase that we're experiencing has actually been 20% year on year. July 20 to July 21 is a 20% increase in construction costs. So that's a significant amount of money. And if we imagine that cascading into next year, if you've quoted for work earlier this year, you're going to be perhaps in the doo-doo for the jobs next year unless you review them. So as I said, it's not as straightforward as slapping 10% on and say, well, that'll cover inflation, because at 20% for a start, 10% wouldn't have been anywhere near enough. But obviously, as every month passes, say, for example, you booked in the job, say June 2021, and it's going to start in the spring of 22. You've got all of that time elapsing between the start, the start of the project and when you originally quoted. And then not only that, if it's a 6-9 month project, you've then got another 6-9 months worth of inflation on top of the job cost. And that is really going to set your profits back. So in a minute, I'm going to show you a spreadsheet on that, just to give you an example of what that looks like and how that's going to impact your job price. And it's really quite surprising and slightly worrying, actually, if you have taken on those jobs into next year. Okay, so here's that spreadsheet that I thought I would just talk to you about really briefly. It might be a little bit complicated, it might seem, but I just wanted to show you a little bit of the impact of inflation on the cost of a job. And if you're not thinking about it, how it could impact you. So firstly, just looking at this left-hand side of the screen. So the Office of National Statistics, so that's the kind of government's kind of statistics body, has said that inflation over the course of July 20 to July 21 was 20%. So is, as I was saying before, unprecedented times. That's about 1.7 monthly inflation. So just say I quote, I've estimated a job's going to cost about 50,000, and perhaps I've just bunged straight 20% onto the job. So I'm expecting a 10k profit. So my job is going to be £60,000. Okay, so carry that 50,000 actual job cost in your head. So what compound interest is doing is saying, okay, well, in month one on that £50,000 job, it's going to have generated an inflation of £833. So the £50,000 job at the end of month one, it's actually not 50,000 that's going to cost us to build it anymore. It's 50.8K. All right. But just imagine that you've actually quoted on day one, but the project is starting in 6 months' time because you're really, really busy. So what you've actually got is the inflation in the month, giving us our new price. And then the next month, and this is why it's called compound inflation, is actually 1.7% on top of the new price of the works. Okay, so it's a 1.7% on top of the already just inflated price. So as you go through month on month, you're actually adding monthly more and more inflation because you've got a slightly higher inflated price at the start of the month. I'm not sure if that's easy to follow, but basically what I'm saying is that by the time you get to start the project, your actual costs are likely to be more in the order of £55,000, the actual job cost. So if you've only quoted the client, back at the start, £60,000, you're now only going to make 5,000. However, worst is you've probably got, maybe 3 to 6 months of the project to build. So by the time that you've finished your project, say you're at completion there, your actual inflated price, the actual job cost is perhaps closer to the 60,000 that you originally quoted. So if the original cost of the works you said was 5,000, you've now got 9,000, nearly 10,000 of inflation on that project, would you believe? Because inflation is so high, that's the cost of every month's inflation. So our new actual cost to build is £59,000, £970. So if I only quoted them 60K, the difference being I'm making a whopping £30 for all of that work. So I paid everyone, yes, if things didn't go wrong, if there was no, delays, what have you. So that's that new price that is 120% because the cost has gone up by 20%, as you can see, this annual inflation. So this worst case is, if I go slightly further over, is saying that we went wrong, there was problems, there was delays by 6-8 weeks. We're actually now into loss making because the cost of the inflation is nearly £12,000 by this point, because it's all of this. It's all of this now. So if you charge 60K and you've got this inflation, you're actually losing money. Okay, because by that point you've experienced 124% inflation, so 24% inflation on that original 50K. So what do you need to do? I mean, obviously you need to use Estimator Express. We're going to show you that in a minute and how that can help. But just on a basic level, you need to have calculated your inflation on today's price, expecting what it's going to look like in 6-9 months' time. Add that, then add your margin on top, as well as your overhead. You should be calculating overhead and to get to your total price. So that's a super quick example of how inflation is going to really creep up on you over the next 12-18 months. So I know that lots of you watching are really busy, crazily busy, and we get that. And you're probably booked well into 2022, and you should be rightly proud, and I bet you're quite happy that you've got that booked that far in advance, as it does reduce one of those big worries about where's the next job going to come from. But is being booked up, as we've been saying, is it a good thing right now? And we'd argue that unless you've got the right tools to actually help you do that, and Matt, we're going to look at the software in a minute, some of the tools that are about the help with these topics, you could be set at sea and in for some loss-making jobs next year. But there is some good news. Estimator Express will do this inflation calculation for you, super easily. So what you can do is look at, are those jobs that you booked in really worth it? Can you renegotiate those jobs? So you can look at the price within Estimator Express, decide whether that quote that you originally gave is a viable quote now, and if not, have a conversation with your client. You need to be doing that now to either let them kind of make a decision on is it the right thing to do to go ahead, because there's no point in you absorbing the costs, not making any money, and we're still losing money if things go awry. You may as well take that opportunity now. So let's look at those jobs and decide about whether or not you can renegotiate. And then for those later 2022 jobs that you've not yet secured, but will be hopefully quoting for fairly soon, only take on ones that are profitable, that account for your inflation, your overheads and your profit margin. And by using Estimator Express, it can do that for you. So a bit more before we go into the demo. So having run them through Estimator Express, you can check their value, and then you can set up a Gantt chart as well, a build program, that's to say, for the project. And you can then see the impact on your materials ordering, your labour, your plant schedules, and so on, so that you can see the impact of cost and obviously the lead times. You then, having run them through Estimator Express, you can make an educated decision on what to do about those 2022 jobs. So let's have a quick chat about some of the features that we've got in Estimator Express before I hand over to Matt. So thanks for your patience while I've been waffling on that. But there's a lot to kind of assimilate and talk about here. So Estimator Express is our estimating and project management software. Often people think, oh, Estimator Express, it's all about winning the work, it's about securing the job, because it's got impressive quotations within the software and a good breakdown for your client. But the software goes much further than that to help your business. So a few tools in there that'll help. Number one, it's got Price Tracker, doesn't it, Matt, to download latest prices into the software. Those are updated monthly, aren't they? I believe, using yes. Latest prices. So that's coming down into the software and make sure that the estimates as you start them are using today's latest prices. And then you can use another tool within the software, which is the inflation rates tool, and you can allow for the current rate. So as I've been saying, the last year's inflation, according to the Office for National Statistics, has been 20%. So that's about 1.7% a month. So you want to be adding for a chunky inflation rate. So you put that in the software and it does all these complex calculations for you that we were talking about before to make sure that when you start the job, you've got the right price to quote for. And it goes a bit further than that as well. It adds in wastage, things like that, so that you've got a little bit of a buffer to make sure that you're ordering not only the right amount, but you've got a little bit of slack, especially when products right now are quite difficult to come by. You want to be on the right side of your ordering rather than ordering a bit too lean. I know lean is mean, but you don't want to, if you've got really difficult lead times, to be under ordering, because then you're just going to have challenges getting products to site on time. You've also got profit forecasts within the software, so it can then have a look at either those future jobs that you're quoting for 2022, or those jobs that you've rerun, and can say, are they worth the candle, bearing in mind the inflation that we've been talking about. So it's got this Gantt chart tool in there. I don't know if any of you knew, but there's also this build program tool, and that cascades into all of your schedules of your materials, your labour, your plant. So it's telling you what to order and when, and giving you tons of notice so that you can then get this to your supply chain partners, your merchants, in a really good amount of time to make sure that you get what you need on site in good time. And a lot of users, or well, sorry, I should say a lot of prospects come to us and say, well, do you know what, I could probably estimate in my head, I can guesstimate what a job is likely to come in on. Well, I'd argue, firstly, you might be a bit off the mark today with the price increases that we're experiencing. But the big piece of work is often in the preparation of all the schedules, the what do I need, what, how much, when, and that piece of work. And it does it instantly for you, automatically. You'll see today that off the back of the estimate, you've got all of this information and management information at your fingertips. no need for kind of retyping stuff out. So an extra benefit of Estimator Express. A final note from me is that you also can calculate your stage payments. So with inflation being so challenging, and obviously the outgoings of your business till you get paid being that much more challenging, you want to be charging your clients stage payments, and Estimator Express will allow you to do that. And again, Matt's going to talk you through that and the importance of deposits and what have you. And on top of which, you've got, importantly, those cash flow forecasts. You've really got to make sure that you're managing cash within the business in these more challenging times. You might feel a bit flush, but you're going to get some chunky invoices further out because of the impact of inflation. So you might be carrying around a price of whatever bag of cement in your head, but it's actually going to be maybe quite different to what you initially estimated. And final note before I'm going to hand over to Matt is a note on contracts experts. So lots of people don't get excited about the notion of a contract. And I can understand why, because lots of builders say, well, I don't want to give the client something to hang you with, but conversely, it can really work in your favor because it documents everything really nice and cleanly between you and the client. And particularly today, you really might want the opportunity, if you're quoting for jobs for, 12 to 18 months time, which, in many cases builders are doing that at the moment, you need the ability to re-quote closer to the job commencement time so that you can pick up any increases that you weren't aware of that have kind of popped up in the meantime. And the new Contracts Expert 2021 has clauses in there that will allow you to do that. There's a really neat covering letter which talks about why there is that need to do that during these COVID and post-Brexit times and the impact on pricing. It's very standard practice in large projects. For example, in hospital building, road building, all this kind of stuff. Those big projects, those clauses are standard. But for smaller residential projects like extensions and loft conversions, things like that, it doesn't seem like it's the dumb thing to reprice. But when you are booked up so far in advance, and we have got these unprecedented times, you need to be thinking more smartly. So Contracts Expert will let you do that, and we'll look at that literally just for a couple of minutes towards the end of today's session with Matt. All right, so I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to hand over to Matt, and he's going to jump in with a Blue Peter style Estimator Express job. Here's one I have done earlier. So I've let you screen share now, Matt. So if you want to take on over, all yours.
Thank you so much. And if I can get Jo just to confirm that she can see my screen.
I can indeed. Yeah, perfect. I can see you're in the library.
Excellent. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you how Estimator Express will be able to help you control many aspects of your business, like Jo has been touching on previously. Now, before I actually jump into that Blue Peter type job, I just want to show you how the software is actually working in the background and how we would actually help you maintain just control over price increase, being able to decide where your materials are coming from, the inflation and the overhead and the profit that you're actually going to be putting on top of your jobs. And then I will touch into something called the specification in a moment, but we won't go into too much detail there. First off, however, quite self-explanatory. You're going to be looking at your overhead, profit, and inflation. Now, overheads and profit versus inflation are two separate things, only because inflation does work with compound interest, as it were, like Jo was saying earlier on, within our spreadsheet, versus what your profit's going to be. So you could add a 10% profit on £100, but if you've got an inflation of what's happening in the market of 20%, that 10% is going to disappear quite rapidly over the course of a couple of months. So you want to be able to look and forecast how much money you want to be making on top of your job, because running businesses, you've got insurances you have to cover, anything that might go wrong as well on site, anything you can't foresee, as well as any additional salaries that you might have to pay, people in an office, so on and so forth. So this is what we want to be able to help you cover when you are looking at your overhead versus the profit, the money that you want to actually make on top of the job as well, that you want to be able to feed back into the business. So that could be an additional van, more reliable tools, something like this. But then we also have your inflation rate. And as you can see here, you can put a delay on the inflation as well, and you can fix that as to any months. We go 6 weeks because that's usually the middle of a job, of a 12-week job, 16-week job. So you can then just make sure that you are covering that. So you're not losing any money off of the job. A prime example would be with the inflation of timber and insulation. If you're working on, say, a loft conversion, they rely heavily on those two materials. So if you weren't thinking about inflation, your profit probably would have been zapped quite rapidly within the last few weeks. Okay, so it's definitely something you have to be quite secure about and quite on top of when it comes to that monitoring of what's happening in the industry, really. Away from here, the way that we can actually help you track prices is something called the Price Tracker Plus. Now, as Joe did say, that we track prices up and down the country. Okay, so we do that nationally. We do work with several large merchants as well. And what we can do with that, if I just hop into your material here, we can help you either lock into these local merchants that you're actually using, or you can actually take a national average of what's happening across the marketplace. Okay, now we do have a search function at the top. If this is going to be as accurate as you need it to be, if you type in timber, it's not a very good search. It will give you everything from balustrade to nails. Okay, however, if you were to look for, say, C24 joists, it's going to take you directly to that. And as you know, there is a vast selection of what you can use. So we've got the price by the meterage as well. Okay, and these prices can be tweaked if you would like them to be more accurate to what you might be getting with a local merchant. Okay, but we have a technical team that can sit in there with you and help you do that and help you control your material costs. Okay, next to that, we then have something called your favorite merchants. As I said, we do work with merchants as well. Okay, so if you do use the merchants that we work with, we can take your pre-agreed discounts, feed those into the software, and then you can actually start cherry picking where you're going to be getting your material from. That way, then the software, when it goes through, say, a brick and block cavity wall or your foundations, timber frame walls, it knows exactly where you're going to be pulling those materials from your preferred suppliers. And you can just drop in here, hit the drop-down box and select them there. Okay, again, speeding up that process. And once again, we do this through training. We do this through one-to-ones. All right, so don't feel that this is something you have to do by yourself. Lastly, you've then got your specifications on the right-hand side here. I'm just going to hop into what we call the extension specification, similar to a specification that you're reading on a job-to-job basis. However, what this will do again is start cherry-picking the teams that you're going to be working with and the material costs that you're going to be working with as well. Okay, so what we can do is we can see that we've got structural concrete and mass concrete. Here, we can select a price dependent on whether or not you're going to be using a preferred supplier and with their cost per square meterage or cubic meterage. The luxury of this as well is when you've actually gone through a job, if you are under a certain square meterage or cubic meterage, what you can do is you can do a very quick change in material cost just in case the price has gone up if you are using a certain amount of concrete that's under a preferred amount supplied by the supplier, which I've learned doing my own works at home. So you can do that as well.
Sorry, Matt, I was just going to interject. You know, with Price Tracker and Price Tracker Plus, I wondered whether we should just explain to people watching that that's actually a piece of work that HBXL do on behalf of our users. So we've got a team as part of our software development team who do monthly desk-based research and also some really quite clever algorithms searching the web for average pricing from the marketplace, so it's live. So once a month at the moment, because of the impact of inflation, we're updating the software for you. So there's a big piece of work that goes into that, and I know how hard it is to stay on top of pricing at the moment because it's changing with every job that every builder's taking on. So it was probably just with me. Sorry to interrupt you there. Explaining that.
Yeah, so there is a lot of work that does go into the background of us tracking prices. Definitely. However, with, as you'll know, with the likes of concrete, it's quite tough to actually gauge what's going on, especially when it comes to ordering sizes as well. And the luxury with the software, and what you'll see through the reports I'll be able to show you in a few moments, you'll be able to see what the software is going to be able to help you gauge with that as well. All right. Further through that, we can then start saying with your teams, what teams you want to be using. So we've gone through best case scenario. We've gone through years and years of how the industry has actually developed calculating how work is meant to be done as well. So we know how long a job should take and what materials should be used through a build phase. So we're not missing anything. More often than not, we're actually emphasizing the materials that you need to use, some of which builders on a regular basis do forget to actually quote for as well. So we're not missing anything. We are crossing our T's and dotting our I's, as it were. But what you can do here is you can really set out with the teams that you want to use, or if you knew that you weren't going to be using a team and you were going to be only estimating the material because you want to bring in, say, subcontractors, you can very quickly set things as a subcontract cost, and the software would calculate all the material for you and none of the labor, and you can drop that in as a lump sum fee. So there are different ways and different options that you can estimate throughout this software. It's not just our way or the highway. We have thought about how everybody does approach estimating. We want to be able to cover that as well. Okay, so there are different ways that you can use this package. So away from how the software actually works in the background, what we can do is we can actually look at a job that I've done earlier on. As Joe said, a bit of a blue piece a moment. So I'm going to be looking at a lean-to extension, and something that's going to be coming in at about £42,250. Okay, and then what you've got here, and as you can see, we've got the dimensions, we've got an image, and we've got a job cost in the top right-hand corner. So we know that it's going to be 42,249. We've then got a profit and overhead of 11,245, and then the sales price is going to be £53,500, and that is actually before VAT as well. So you're still looking at adding 20% on top of this, depending on whether or not you are VAT registered or not, and those calculations go with that. Okay, and the software will calculate that for you. If you aren't VAT registered, you can actually set your quote as a company that isn't VAT registered. Okay, so we've done and helped you with that maths as well. And this job of about £42,500, £53,500, say, okay, this took me about 25-30 minutes to go through, working off of the information of a set of plans. Okay, so the software is very intuitive and helps you control this and go forwards. Over on the left-hand side, we then have the main estimate. So once you have gone through the job, the software will give you a cost by build phase, everything from site setup through to your cleaning and completion cost, depending on whether or not that is something that you would like to offer your clients. And you have the option of being able to select any of the individual calculators on the left-hand side, and you can go into them and you can start tweaking any of the materials, any of the trade, if you haven't set them up within your specifications during your one-to-ones or during your training with us as a team as well. Okay. Now, firstly, to actually help you control and manage the material and the labor and the plant aspect of what's going on within your job, we have something at the top that says the resource quantity rounding. What this is actually allowing you to do are seeing how we're rounding off materials for you. Now, we are one of the only software packages in the UK that covers this and does this actual calculation for you. So what I'll do is I'll select rules applied in job, and you're going to be able to see the material that we're going to be covering. So we've got ballast bulk bag, building sand bulk bag, sub base, pea gravel, sharp sand, blue circle, mastercrete, original cement. Okay, so these are your typical type of aggregates, and you can see that we've got that headed as well. And over on the right-hand side, you can then start seeing how many we're calculating and the wastage that's applied to that as well. So one of the things that we do calculate for you throughout a job is material wastage. Okay, so we've got the national average of how wastage should be calculated there. So if I look at, say, pea gravel, for example, on this particular job with the drainage that we're going to be working with, I would need exactly 5.63 bags of pea gravel. With the wastage that is applied, that would go up to 7.04. However, you can't order 0.63 of a bag of pea gravel, and you can't order 0.4 of a bag of pea gravel. So what we've done is we've rounded it up to 8 bags. However, you might feel that, okay, then 8 bags of pea gravel on this job might be slightly overkill, especially with the amount of ballast that you're going to be using as well. So you feel that you can actually start throwing that into the actual, into your foundations, into your cavities as well. So you can just think, right, okay, then we can actually just use some other items as well, just to pop that in there to bulk it out a little bit more. So what you can then do is you can manually override what we've done as well. And what it's going to do over on the right-hand side here is tell you how much is taken off the price of your job. As you can see here, it's removed £1.40. That's not actually a lot, because down in the right-hand side here, with all the rounding that we've done for you, it's going to be rounding the job up £2,295.97 anyway. Okay, and this is what the software is actually going to be helping you achieve. So when it comes to ordering your materials, you're not going to be having to make the decision with a 3.6 rolls of tarpaulin whether or not you want to actually buy 4 or buy 3. So we're actually giving you that power a lot earlier on within the stage, and it's going to do that calculation for you, or it could do it automatically for you depending on whether or not you want to trust the software in that regard. However, what you need to know is that the software wants to make you money. Okay, it's one of the things that when our users are seeing this software and how they actually come to terms with the costs that the software is giving you, is the fact that when more often than not you start thinking about a job, you almost start going into a job thinking, how am I going to win it? And the first method of that is, let's save on cost, when it shouldn't be. Your attitude should be a lot more different. And that's what the software is here to give you, because it wants to give you the rounded figure, the perfect figure for you and the job that's going to be supplied for your business and for your client. That's when you can start thinking about profit, start thinking about inflation, start thinking about your margins as well. Because if you go in with a job with a 10% profit and your client and you start talking about costs and you start losing that 10% profit, what you then start realizing is you start eating into the cost of the job and you'll start paying for it. Okay. And that's one of the luxuries of a calculator. It's very black and white. There's no gray area. And that's something that we actually go through with our training with you as well, through our trainer Liv, through our technical team with Tom and Joe. We actually want to sit down with you and actually help you take these steps going into managing your business, managing cost control as well. And it's not just for your material. Under this side of the things, you can start clicking these little triangles, and then we can start seeing labor. So we're not going to be putting you in for half-hour jobs. We are going to be rounding it up to your full jobs and your full hours. We've then got subcontractor costs as well. Whether or not you are happy with the prices that you've put in, you can actually then tweak those. Your sundry costs, so these are insurances that you need to start thinking about as well. And then we've also got your plant. And I can scroll down here, and you can see that we've got your shovel costs in there. We're not charging £12 a week, but we are going to be saying over the course of the job, something that we're going to be using heavily with a shovel, because when I chose this job, I wasn't using an excavator. I was actually using a manual dig. We are going to be charging at least £11 for the use of that shovel as well. And this is something that many people might think, oh, why are they actually doing that? It's because of wear and tear. You might break a shovel. It's not really something that you might think about going out and buying a new one from Selco or somewhere like that. However, in the world that we live in now, if you had a van broken into and your tools were stolen, that's a whole different kettle of fish. You might have an insurance to cover that, but if you don't, just know that the software in the background is covering you for anything that does break, anything that does go missing, or in the worst case scenario, anything that does get stolen. These prices are, over the course of 6 months, a couple of new drills have been covered for with these costs. But you can then start seeing power tools in there, trench sheets, site accommodation, spoil removal from your skips, what size skips that we want to do. And we've got something called the smart scheduler, something that I'm not really touching on today. However, you can take more control over this, again, just to say whether or not you'd like to prefer 8, 6 or 10 yard skips. Maybe you prefer a roll on roll off skip, and the amount of wastage that is calculated within the software would then be pulled in going further down the line onto how much spoil will be taking up and how much space will be taken up within these skips as well. So it's a lot of maths going into that to actually save you a lot of time to worry about being more reactive. You can plan ahead more, and that's something you want to be running as a business. But once you're happy with this, you can then go to the main settings. You can add that resource rounding data into the job. And as we can see, that price has gone up for us there as well, something that we're actually happy with going forward. Once you're happy with this page, we can then start looking at the Gantt charts that Joe was talking about earlier on as well. And once I've actually gone through this part of the job, I'm going to jump back into the main page, and I'll show you how you can actually work, build programs and combine jobs together, something that will be very handy for you if you have already got multiple jobs running at this one time. So with your build program, you can select this button here, and it's going to give you your Gantt charts. Okay, so what I can do here is if I just go calculate new build program a second, I'm just going to click yes. What we can see from the get-go are how many days that we're actually going to be working on particular build phases, and you can have full control over this as well. All right. So as you can see here, we've got commencement, we've got that 2 days, site setup 3 days. It's easy to see here. And you can see that the information over on the right-hand side is saying the exact same thing. Now, we've based that off of best case scenario and the amount of hours it's going to be taking for certain items to be set up within your commencement and your site setup. However, you might just think, right, okay, we've got a little bit of bad weather coming up. We might need to just interject how many hours we're going to be able to spend outside in the open. So you might want to go, I'm just going to pull site setup to be 4 days instead of 2 or instead of 3. Once you've done that, you'll see that that's going to have a direct influence on this price as well. So we've now got 4 days. I can click finish. This is going to shake, and that's now gone up to 4 days. Okay. Now, the more you start looking at this, the more you can actually start referencing your jobs and what's happening at the same time and what's going on in your particular jobs. So as you can see, these are going in the chronological order of how build phases go. Okay. So as you know, you can't get the roof structure on unless you've done the masonry shell. Okay, so you can see how that works. You might be thinking, right, okay, it makes me look like I'm working over a weekend. However, we've got 7 days worth of work and it's blocking out a Saturday and Sunday. It's presuming that these aren't going to be working days. Okay, I can zoom in if you wish, and I can pull this across as well. And as we can see, we're going from the Tuesday to the following Wednesday, and that would be 7 days worth of work. If we were including Saturday and Sunday, that would be 9. Okay, so you can see that we are covering and we are controlling this aspect for you as well. Not only that, but as you know, we are coming into the winter months as well. You might be rained off for a few days, and that does really affect the masonry shell. So what could happen is you might be pushed back a couple of weeks, and it could be a couple of weeks depending on what's actually happening within the UK at the moment. And if that does happen, it's not going to just keep your same job where it is. It's going to cascade everything across, because this is going to have a direct impact on what's happening with your other jobs, okay, and what's happening with your other build phases as well. One of the things that we do have set within our contracts that I will show you later on as well, you do have caveats that you can set in stone, that what you can say is if you have a client that's maybe going to be bringing in a plumber that they might know, a cousin or a brother-in-law, something like that, you can then start stating within your contracts and within your quotes that, right, if they are not on site, we can charge more to bring our staff in, because if they cease your job going forward, that can implement start times of other jobs. That can influence costs for your trade as well, because you're not going to have your guys sitting on site doing nothing, but you might need the first fix of a plumber coming in and sorting that out on a particular day, on a particular week. So we've got these things, and we are covering this for you as well, and you'll be able to read that throughout our contracts and our quotes. But over on the right-hand side, this isn't just information giving you a color of what the masonry shell is going to look like and the start and finish time. But if I just pull this across, what we're going to be able to see is we're going to be able to see a resource breakdown and something called settings as well. With the resource breakdown, what we're going to be able to see now are the materials that we're going to be using, especially within the external walls themselves, what materials are we going to be using and what trade we're going to be using, how much we're going to be using, and what their costs are going to be as well. This is great information for, say, a site manager that's going to be on site, just wanted to foresee what's going to be happening over the coming weeks. Not only that, it just gives you an idea of what you should be using and whether or not you're going to be going over your allocated material as well. Okay, but it doesn't just do that for material. We can come down a little bit further. We can start looking at our plant as well. We just want to make sure that everything is going to be covered for you. Okay, and it does that for every build phase. So it's not just the masonry shell, it's the roof structure. So you can see soffit fixing, guttering, stop ends, gutter unions, clips, outlets, downpipes. So we're not just looking at, when it comes to a roof structure, the tiles, the timber, we are looking at everything else that goes into that as well. Again, another thing that many builders have in the past forgotten to just calculate for, maybe stop ends, and before you know it, that's 6, 7, 8 quid, 10 quid that you've got to go and spend. That's from your own pocket. That's something that you haven't put into the price as well. Okay, so we want to make sure that you are being covered for this. But once you're happy with how your build program has been set out, you can then start going to your outputs as well. And this is going to be graph. This is going to be your reports for the actual software and for the job itself. Okay, one of the things that will be influenced heavily by the build program would be, if I look at my data reports over on the right-hand side, would be your material order schedule. So if you start firing these materials and these build phases back due to weather or potentially staffing issues, what will then happen is the software will start telling you, right, okay, then with the masonry shell, we wouldn't have to start doing or ordering these materials until the 11th of a particular date. So your engineering bricks, your facing bricks. The software will then tell you what you're going to be using them for as well. So bricks for use in splash course. You would then have the merchant name, so who you're getting them from, their particular merchant code. And then you can start looking at how much you need to order and how much it's going to cost. And this would be including wastage as well. And you can drag in what the wastage would be, what the order would be before wastage, if you wished. But this is just one of the many reports that we have and that we can sit there with you. Not only that, something that's very good to gauge how this job's going to be looking for you is going to be the cost summary report. So if I click that on the left-hand side, we can then start seeing, with all of our labor, we've got a complete labor total down the line. We can then see that we've got the resource cost excluding wastage, whatever wastage would be costed in there as well. And then we've got the resource cost including wastage, what overhead we're going to be making. So under my reports, I've got no overhead on my labor. However, I do have a profit. So what we can see here is that we've not calculated any overhead, but we have calculated the profits and what our total markup of that is going to be. And then what would happen is it would add these two columns together and give you total cost, including profits and overhead, up to £17,536.77.
I'd be sticking an overhead there in labour, Matt. That was me. I'd be
it's just purely, do you know what? I completely forgot that I actually took that off as an example with a previous demonstration. It was one of those things that I didn't twig to earlier on.
Damn it, put that back in. But anyway, we get the sense of what's going on there. We can see that's happening with material. But I guess it shows the flexibility, because you may or may not be charging an overhead on, say, subcontract. Although again, I would, because you're managing those people and making sure you've got project management and insurance and all sorts for those guys being on site. But it adds up, doesn't it? It quickly adds up.
Oh, certainly does. And especially when you start looking at your material as well, when you start seeing what wastage is going to be allocated for that as well, because you always have to think what could be spilled, especially when it comes to aggregates. When you are shoveling that into, say, a mixer, there's a lot of it going on the ground, a lot of it that you can't use when it comes to cement powders as well. Mm-hmm. So these are things that you do really have to start thinking about. It depends on how messy your tradesmen are on site as well. So it's one of those things that you really have to think about.
So tell me, if I wanted to change that overhead, is that as simple as going back into that same dialog box you showed us earlier? And it will
so if you did want to change that overhead price, what you can do is you can just come into, well, you can see where it says data reports on the left-hand side. I can just make that nice and small a second. And then, it won't go small. That's fine. But what we can do is we can come down to the job settings down here. I can select that. And then what I can do is I can actually start coming into my overhead profit and inflation.
Right, you're back in there.
I can change that. And then I can add in, say, a 18% markup when it comes to my overheads.
Yeah.
If I wanted to go back into the reports, back to my outputs, I can then start seeing my cost summary reports. And now that will have an 18% markup.
Yeah. So
my overhead as well. So it's a very quick change.
2.6, it's added in there. So it's really important that people are thinking about overhead across all the cost centres, as well as just slapping a margin on. Because I think it is quite tempting just to say, okay, well, the job cost, I think it's going to be about 50k. I'll stick 10% on. Right, okay. Let's call it 60 without inflation, without any overhead. And you're straight into dangerous territory if anything goes wrong on the job, because your margins are just too thin.
Of course. And if you start thinking about all your overheads and your costs and your total markups as well and total wastage. Yeah. So as we can see here under resource wastage total, we can see that we've already got, say, £1,200. So if this was, say, this is a £43,000 job. Now, what the software has calculated for is best case scenario wastage. Okay, and that's best case. Now, if that's £1,200 and you've put a 10% profit of say £4,200 on a £42,000 job, you're now down to 3 with everything going perfectly to plan. And that's making sure that there's no inflation in there either. So this isn't taking into consideration your inflation yet either. This is purely just what we're going to be throwing away or potentially ruining and breaking on site. So it starts giving you a nice idea of what can be happening over the stage of a job. Now, this is just a simple lean-to extension, but we will have guys here that are going to be building developments, and that wastage will then amplify, because not only are you looking at what could be going and being misused on site, but things that could be, things could be taken from site, additional lintels, things like that. People that can think, right, okay, then they might not be able to miss this. And that's the problem that we're going to be having if you don't look at these numbers and you don't really analyze this. And this is that major step between being able to be a builder on site and being a business owner, because the moment that you start actually bringing people on to do work for you under your name, under your business name, it's then when you actually have to start thinking as a business person. And that is a great step. It's a daunting one, but it's one that we are actually here to be able to help them do that and actually help manage that as well. And we want to give that influence, and we want to give that help as much as we can.
So I guess once you've done the first job or two and you've kind of got your head around what it's calculating for you, if your settings are right on things like your overheads, your profit margins and your inflation rate, and you set that at a global level for the software, it's doing all that for you instantly. You don't have to think about it. I mean, we're obviously talking to everyone today as if, because they've not seen this before, but once it's set up, it's doing it. So once, as you're estimating your new project, it's done it all for you. Nothing to worry about. You can be secure in knowing that your overheads are covered, your wastage is covered, your inflation is covered, your margin is as you'd expect. So the price is the price. It's not just the job cost, if you see what I'm saying. It's not just
that's one of the things, and probably one of the most important things that people need to understand about our software as well, is because we've had users that bought this software, went straight into a job, fired that over to a client and won, which is, it's not unheard of, and it's great to hear, because people go, right, okay, I know the software can work and it can make me money straight away. But the thing that makes this such a integral tool for somebody's business is the fact that it's the amount of time that you can save and the accuracy that it can give you. And what I mean by that is, as you said, if you can set a universal precedent on your costs, on your labor, on your plant material, you've got how your teams how your teams work, who you estimate for when it comes to labor, who you don't estimate for when it comes to labor, and you want to only focus on the material. The software will be able to do that, and you can select a template within this package, put in the dimensions, and the software's done everything for you down to the last screw and bit of batten that you would need. Not only that, is that if you are turning the software on and you're clicking update prices, you don't even have to worry about thinking about the prices now either. The software is actually just going to be going with the national average. It's going to be uplifting everything. And it doesn't just do that for the material. We speak to our users. We ask them how our trades are being influenced as well when it comes to these costs. So our trade prices are going up as well. Our labor prices are going up. So we want to make sure that people are understanding that, look, even if you have put in it £25 an hour for a bricklayer, if we've spoken to our users and we've seen a national inflation of about 15-20%, so everything's gone up by an additional £5 per hour for bricklayers, if you click that button, that will be applied to your bricklayer as well. They might not have picked it up, but they might have done that, not told you. And when it comes to payday, they go, actually, no, I'm this price. And the software's done that work for you. It's actually anticipated that inflation as well.
I should add there, so Price Tracker is our materials pricing tool, and that updates you, and every time you hit that button, that downloads the materials prices. Labor is slightly different in the sense that when we release updates, we're letting you know well in advance that that a price review has been done, and that doesn't come down with that Price Tracker on materials. No. Just in case anyone kind of says you said, but just so you're aware, because obviously you've quoted for these jobs with your labor rates within the software, and we don't automatically just overwrite your labor rates that you've spent time putting in there. But if we're very aware that there's been a significant shift, those go and out released as a formal update. Listen, Matt, there's something I realised that I hadn't covered earlier, and I know I've got a list here of the things that we were going to look at, and we're going to look at the client quote and things like stage payments in just a moment. But I just wanted to pick up on some of the guys listening, as we said before, they've got their jobs, some of the jobs lined up for early 2022. And I think looking at this particular report here, I think it's really well worth, even if you've won those jobs or your client has said, yeah, I want to go ahead with those jobs next year, rerun them in the software. Get a copy of the trial of the software, run them in the software in trial mode. Have a look at what the job is calculated for you in terms of your job costs, and bearing in mind the wastage and the overhead and inflation. And I think you could be quite shocked, and at the price that you put in is not necessarily going to make you any money, and kind of worst case is going to lose you money. And that spreadsheet that we looked at before, where you could see actually quite quickly inflation is really impacting on profit. It's having a very depressing impact. So run through those jobs you've already won, and then take that opportunity to have a chat with your customer. And some customers will respond well to I need to bring this to your attention before we start. Worst case would be we get partway through the project and I'm going to have to tell you about this. Have conversations with them. And as I said before, I'm so sorry I'm repeating myself, but this is unprecedented levels of inflation. We're talking about 20% year on year. That, when has that last, occurred? The ONS says a generation ago. So, and I was too little then to know what was happening then. So I'm going to go with what the government statistics say. So rerun them, and also you'll get a lot of benefit with planning the job with the Gantt chart, because you're going to get that for free off the back of having done that estimate. So not only will you have done a sanity check with your pricing, including all of these additional costs that we've been talking about, you'll have the Gantt chart so that you can start to run the project organized in an organized fashion, start as you need to go on, use the planning tools that are there. And that's also, as I said before, this whole scheduling piece of work that everyone has to do, which takes a significant amount of time and organization to do. It's done that for you for free as well. So I know you might have got these jobs won, but sanity check them, plan them, and the profit is in the planning. So you can use all of these reports to help you judge whether the job should be still undertaken, or what you can do to bring it in back on budget if you're going to go over budget with inflation, etc. So it's well worth doing that. And of course, what we're seeing is that, with your later in 2022 jobs that you might not have won yet, you're going to be set up right to be charging the right price. And if you want a demo with Matt or his colleague Mark or any of the rest of the team on actually recreating a job from scratch, they'll be more than happy to talk you through this, because obviously today we were talking about these management tools, so we did the Blue Peter job, but they'd be more than happy to take you through, okay, well, how do I get to this point? How do I get all this good stuff that Matt's showing us today? So I'm blethering on. Here we are in the cost summary. Back over to you, Matt.
No, it's so. One of the things, again, through managing a job, as Joe said earlier on, most builders, if they're worth their salt anyway, can see a job and go, it's going to be around about X. Now, it's a very dangerous way of living through businesses if you're going to be doing off of hunches and guesstimates from previous experience. However, what the software is going to do is going to save you the time in the long run of what would actually be happening throughout that previous methodology, as it was, because you could probably guess how much a job's going to be. However, that's not the long part of doing your estimate. It's usually writing it up and or then planning your material. Okay, your material ordering, how much you need to order for this particular job as well. So what the software is going to do is going to be able to use the quantities that are going to be necessarily needed. Okay, and what you're going to be having down here is something called the materials by type. So what the software is then going to do here is it's not going to give it to you in a material order schedule, but what it's going to do is going to say, right, okay, over the course of this job, you are going to be using this much aggregate, this much block, this many bricks. It's going to tell you exactly what you're going to be using and your prices that you're paying at the moment, how you buy them in, so whether it's each per meter square, per meter, where you're getting them from, their product codes, how much you need to order, and how much it's going to cost. And as you can see here, down on the pea gravel, I changed it down to 7 bags, and that's coming through the software. So it's not as if I'm just saying it's going to be 7 bags and the software just ignores me. It's going to be pulling that all the way through the job as well. Now, the reason why this is actually quite an important material report is because what you can do with this information is you can even take out the price of what you're paying at the moment. So I can take out what I'm paying right now. I can also take out the merchant and the resource code. So I could just remove these by going to the bottom right-hand corner and just dragging and dropping. And then you can see how much we're currently paying for them, how we need to buy them, and how much we need to buy. And what you could do is, as a last case scenario, you can even take out the purchase cost if you wish. Now, what this report can be done and used by is being able to hand this over to your merchant and saying, right, okay, then I need to order 24 bags of Blue Circle. I need to order 7 bags of pea gravel. I need to be able to get 12 bags of sub base, 5 bags of building sand. And that's when you can actually start talking to your merchant and start haggling these prices and actually talking about what they might be able to do for you if you're going to be using them with bulk case scenario. And the luxury of this is as well, to get back to that original report setting, all you have to do is just click restore report. So you can print this off with a nice click of a button, restore that report, go yes, it's back to the original. And what you can now do with this is you can then start seeing whether or not you're going to be saving money with this particular merchant. It's information that you can send over quickly and efficiently to the merchants of exactly what you're going to be needing, including wastage as well. And that way, then you can start seeing how we can save you a little bit of money. And obviously you would do this after your client said yes. Okay, so you want to go with the higher price first with your client, and then you want to start being able to save your money. But let's hope none of your clients are on this video this evening to hear take you a little bit of knowledge. Once you're happy with that, you can then start seeing what the inflation cost would actually be on this particular job. So if I go to inflated costs, okay, and we've got inflated cash flows, and we can actually start seeing everything that we can start looking at. Okay, so we can start seeing the resource cost, including the wastage, but then we can start seeing how the inflated resource cost would be as well. So you've then got a £4 wastage. I know it's only 18 pence, but
yeah,
still,
I mean,
it's going to be building up over the course.
I think as well, I would have updated those inflation rates to to override.
Yeah, so we've got a 5% inflation at the moment, and that's going to be kicking off after 6 weeks. However, if I said it was going to be kicking off after 2 weeks, and I want it to be a 10% inflation cost, what's going to be happening is that the overall cost would be amplifying. Now you can, as you can see here, grand total is 44,547 down to 44,753. Okay, and this is over quite a small job, but as you can see here, there's a £200 increase straight away. If you do that over the course of a year on a larger job, on the inflation rate that's actually going to be being used, and actually focused on what's happening now within the industry, you can then start seeing that these numbers will start amplifying and getting bigger and bigger. And if you have predicted a job to start playing out in 6 months' time, you've then got to start thinking about how this inflation cost now over one job is then going to be amplified within 6 months' time as well. Again, as we were focusing on within that report earlier on. So it's time to be able to think about, okay, then if I have given, say, a £100,000 job now to kick off in 6 months, how is my profit being influenced by that? Have I thought about the inflation aspect of that? And that's a very nice round number to be able to think about when it comes to these jobs as well. And that could be 2 jobs for you. And if you have 2 jobs kicking off in 6 months' time, that probably would be the £100,000 mark, depending on the size of the job. So you can then start seeing, okay, how much of that has now been eaten away before you've even got there. And that's just a prediction without anything going wrong. So you need to now start thinking about this.
Yeah, and I guess that's back to that spreadsheet that we were looking at earlier. That the impact of the job today. But say you're starting, as you say, in X months' time, and then over the course of that project, so it's a 6-month project, 9-month project, you're really into predicting what costs are going to be looking like in over a year's time. And, unless you've got a crystal ball, you need to be, calculating it effectively with the software. But yeah, I'd whack those inflation rates up. But so what I'm loving as well, Matt, actually, before we move on, is that we didn't even have to type anything up. That is, you just clicking on the report, it's all there for you. The materials are all there for you. You can obviously save your own templated reports if you want to tweak and move columns about and what have you. But out of the box, you've got all of them. There's no typing, there's no faffing. It's all there. And I tell you what, I'm going to love to see. I always really like seeing it. It's the customer quote side of things, with the inflated costs all the way, having cascaded through. Because obviously, writing up a quote is a faffy process. And I realise that today we're not all about winning the job with the in quote professional quote mode. But I guess if you're trying to underline to your customer, well, this is why the price has got to go up, or you're quoting for the jobs later in 2022, and you've got to say, do you know what, it's going to be more expensive than you'd imagine because we're talking about 6-9 months time. The quote really underlines and explains, expands why the price is the price. It's a really nice breakdown. But we'll get that to that in a moment, I'm sure. So.
Yeah, no, I'm going to be going on to that now. So what we've then got under your written documentation in the top left-hand corner here, we can go quote for the main estimates. And then what we're going to be able to see is something that we've created for you to be able to hand over to your client. So what we can see here is a single story extension for a client not provided at this moment in time. And what we can see over on the right-hand side is the information that's being provided on this particular page. If you wanted to create and add in your own logo, you can then click Browse. You can find your logo, import that to the page, set where you would like it, save that logo setting to the library. And then what you'd be able to do is every time that you turn on your estimates and go to this page, it'll be there ready for you to be able to select and kick off and going forward, saving you that time. Now, one of the things that we do need to mention is when you are looking at your quote, you need to click the main settings tab and remember to click that include inflation option. Okay, now I've got mine selected as default, but it's something that we do want to make sure that you are doing as well. So you click that box there and it's always going to be checked for you. Okay, we just want to make sure that you are doing that. From here, we can then start scrolling down the page. We've got our cover page. Then we've got our introductory statement. And as you can see, the information on the right-hand side has changed. So we've now got our introductory statement. We can include our own letterhead. We can include our client name, client address, and say thank you for the opportunity to be able to win the job. From there, we can then start going down the actual quote as well. As you can see here, this is a very black and white quote. Okay, so it's just detailing the site setup to commencement, the foundations, what are actually going to be going on within those particular build phases as well. And you can actually change this and you can modify this to how you would like it to be able to run for you and your business by just clicking build phases on the right-hand side. And then you can just include images if you wish. You can apply those changes. Scroll down. We've now got some images in there as well. You can include the material if you wish. You can get rid of the build phase total. So it's entirely up to you. And you can also change the images if you wish and the descriptions as well. One of the things that we do also do for you, depending on whether or not you have had this conversation with a client or not, is you tell them when the building control officers can come on site and change the price of the quote. Okay, and I know that's an obscure thing to say. However, what we've got down here are the foundations. So we say excavate for foundations using mechanical plant if required and cast foundations. Please note that the building control officer will inspect the foundation prior to concreting and may require changes to the foundation depth and construction. Variations for additional excavation, trench support and concrete, etc., will incur additional costs. Now, this is something that a lot of builders actually miss having the conversation with their client, because at the end of the day, you are digging into ground that you might not be too familiar with. And it's actually nothing to do with you as to whether or not the building control officer wants you to go deeper or wider with those foundation depths. It's their knowledge of what the area is like. That's where they've been given that area, and whether or not the ground is to how they feel. Because you could be going into a clay foundation, they might want you to go deeper. You might not be able to hit. You might hit bedrock a little bit sooner than anticipated. So these are things that your building control officer will be able to then start talking to you about. And this is at least put in that small caveat in brackets for you to be able to cover yourself for that as well. So they can't come back and say, well, you didn't discuss this with us. It's like, well, we may not have a verbal discussion, but that's why we write it on the quote. So it is in black and white. And this is why we do sign off on these things as well. So we want to make sure that you are covering these items. Okay. But what we can then do is we can then go through the entirety of the quote, and it goes in the chronological order of how the build goes. And then if you didn't want to show any of these build phases either, you can just untick them on the right-hand side. I don't know why you would want to do that. But again, you've got full control over how it looks. And then we'll have the acceptance of the estimate. And there are two options for this as well. It breaks down the cost including the VAT and what the VAT would be. And there are two options for you and your client to sign. Again, this will actually stand up and got a whole lot more than a verbal agreement. However, this is still not a contractual, a legally binding document. Okay, so you need to be aware of that. All right. And then at the very end, you'll have your terms and conditions that you will have agreed with maybe a solicitor that you've had written up, or what you would like to actually set up within your own business. Okay. And at the very end, we have the summary of the job. Okay. And the reason why we stick that at the very end is because if you are sending this via email, you don't want them to get to page 2, see the price and go, right, okay, then I don't need to see what else they've actually put in to that quote. Okay. So it's nice to have this at the very end so they can just click back there for reference.
It's interesting. So that 43k, 40, I mean, I'm sure it will have gone up slightly with the amends that we did, but we're talking 43, 45,000. We've then got our overheads, we've got our profit, we've got our inflation, and that's taken us up to 59k. Obviously, then our VAT. So we've got a 71k job here off the back of that basic 43k job cost, and it's within that difference between the 43 and the 71 is where people are going wrong, because they're not accounting for all the stuff that we've been talking about today, which I think is really important to emphasize.
Exactly. And the thing is that this is a price as well. Again, as I said earlier on, is before anybody started thinking, let's save money, let's be competitive. This is the price with everything that's going around in the world right now, helping with your business, making sure that wastage is being covered as well. That's 71,144 and 14 pence. It's a very black and white number, but this is the absolute truth. Now, what will start happening is if you and businesses start going into that, let's be competitive by let's cutting cost. And that's a very dangerous approach to go, because if the software is telling you, right, okay, then this is your price, that's almost 2 + 2 is 4. This is an absolute here. If you start cutting those costs away, that's technically you paying now for the job.
Yeah.
Or you cutting corners, or you being able to go for cheaper material. Whereas those benefits that you've then spent those hours and days agreeing with your merchants, that's now being taken away because you're trying to give this opportunity to somebody else. So you need to start thinking about, how can I be more competitive in a way that isn't just cutting costs, because that is the simplest approach. However, it's not the most beneficial for any business going forward. And that's again why we have these discussions. That's why we talk to you and get you involved with speaking to our not our clients, our partners as well, such as the Better Business Group, companies like this that can actually talk to you, speak to your previous clients and find out where we've gone and what you've done differently and why you've won their previous work. And unfortunately for a lot of builders, when they feel that, okay, then we've gone and we've won our last 5-6 jobs because we have been through professionalism, through how we can offer our business, more often than not, the information that, again, our partners hear back from your particular clients is usually that you're the cheapest version or you're the cheaper cost. And that's something that when people start thinking about this, and this is why we actually offer these services as well, is for you to be able to start seeing how the software can actually start benefiting you with the information that you're actually going to be getting. Because you might only be reading the first chapter of a book right now, and it might be making you money. That's brilliant. But there are pages and pages of information that you're just not seeing right now. And it's something that we really want to open your eyes to. And this is what the software is. It's allowing you to be able to see, okay, let's run this as a business, not just as a cash machine right now. And that's one of the major selling points of our software and us as a business, really.
Yeah, it's important to be running a business, not just being busy. And I know people are rightly proud that they've got work into 2022 and they're rushed off their feet right now. But you can get, inadvertently locked into just being busy running non-profitable jobs. I mean, all of you watching, you're working really, really hard. But you might just be giving away your margin if you're not thinking in this way. And I guess that leads us really briefly, because we're going to have to wrap up really soon, Matt. I think we wanted to look at stage payments and
yes. So then your cash flow as well. It kind of what you were saying there, they might be booked into say 2022. And I've always been under the influence of you've never got anything guaranteed until you have money in your pocket. And it's one of the things that, again, the Better Business Group would actually talk to you about as well. But it's with our software, what you can do is you can set up a deposit on a certain percentage of the job. So the software will break it down into build phase for you. You might be able to see that you've got 186, 148, 4,000. It's very temperamental, but this is what it's going to be taking down. This is what it's going to be date by date and what you're going to be spending, okay, and what you're going to be needing. However, with that, take a deposit. I can say I want to take it today, and it's going to be a 10% or 20% deposit, depending on how much you want to set up, really. And what we can then do is we can then say we want it to be at the start to the end of build phases, or we would like it to be at regular intervals. So if I said I wanted to be at regular intervals and I wanted to be paid every 2 weeks, I can then just start pulling that down. And then what we need to make sure is that we have got that sales price, including inflation. So it's then got that ticked as well. So we've got that price going forward. And then we've also got interim build periods and retention periods as well. And you can set that after 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, depending on however you want to be able to run as a business. But once I've done that there, I can then click apply changes. And it's now going to start giving me a much smaller breakdown in schedule payments. However, it's actually going to give me something a little bit more in line with how we might be working as a business going forward. Now, the thing is that you may be booked up until the June, July 2022. However, if you've got a non-refundable deposit of 20%, at least you know that money's in the bank, and at least you know that they've already committed, because if they haven't given you anything and it's just, again, a verbal agreement of going forward, they can pull out of that at any time. They've got the right to, and then what you have to do is you then start going into that snowball effect of, I need to start finding work. And the problem is, and what you'll find is when I go into the contractual software as well, there's a legally, your clients have the legal right to cancel the job, and you have to give, by law, something called the notice of a right to cancel. And if you don't do that, then they can cancel that job and you can get nothing. So again, it's another thing that there are laws that are changing, and that's why we've got this software in place to be able to cover you. And we give you all the information, all the fact checking as to whether or not, as to why you have to do that as well. Okay, but this is what you would be looking at when it comes to a material order schedule. It gives you an idea of what you're going to be having coming into your business and what you're going to be needing to fire out as well when we actually start looking at your cash flow reports. So your accountant is going to be very happy if you've got something like this that gives them a nice solid platform to be able to work from. And we always want a happy accountant, as it were. But then what we can do here is we can then start looking at that cash flow reports. And we can start seeing what we need to be coming in. So as you can see straight away, we've got that deposits. And then we can start seeing by the dates what we've got going out. And this is going to be for what we're going to be paying our guys, salaries, material. And we can start seeing that, and we can track this. And again, the accountant can track this as well, making their life a little bit easier, making your life easier, being able to find those receipts and associating them with what should be happening on this particular job. And again, this is all linked into the information that we've done with the stage payment. So deposit, retention, that 5%, and that inflation rate as well. So this is all the information that you only have to do once, and the software does thereon going forward.
Yeah. And that's really interesting, because that's keeping you cash flow positive all the way through this project by taking the deposit, and you can see at the end the margin in the bottom right hand corner of what you're actually retaining on that job, that 11.2k. So it's kept you nice and cash flow positive. You shouldn't have to cash flow the client's job. I know different companies have different takes on that, but that's our view.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that can happen, especially now at the moment, seems just such a delay on certain materials, say Windows, for example, and you've got a job that's going to be kicking off in, say, 3 months. So you know that, right, okay, I need to start ordering the material for that now. If you don't have a solid agreement between you and your client and you buy those materials, they can easily turn around and go, well, we didn't sign anything. There's no legal document. There's no further evidence of us being able to say that this job was actually going to be going ahead. So you could be buying those windows and going, well, what am I going to do with this now? I've got some windows that aren't going to be fitted, and it's then their job to try and sell them off, to sell them back to the supplier. That's why that deposit is there, to be able to help you just in case somebody does pull out. But not only that, is that if you have invested in material already, you can then start saying, right, okay, then at least I know that's been covered and they've paid that and they know it's non-refundable. Okay, so that's something that we can emphasize, and something that businesses should really be looking at, especially now. So I guess that's probably quite a neat segue. And I guess we're going to want to look at looking at that 11.2k bottom right. I guess we should super quickly look at profit and go. We're going to go into the contract very briefly, and we're not going to do a contract expert demo, by the way. We're just going to show you a couple of key things. Oh, actually, sorry, it's the 14.5. Scroll, Mr. Scroll. So yeah, it's like how does that kind of profit emerge? So let's look at the profit forecast before we move on to the. So what we can then start doing is we can then start looking at our graphs, and then again, if I just click here in the graphs, we can get a better idea of how many graphs we actually have within this for you as well. So we've got everything from your sales price cash flow through to your profit by estimating calculator and so on. So what we can do is if I just hop into this one here, what we can now see whilst that's loading up, okay, we can see that we've got a nice, if I hover my mouse over there, it's telling me that we've got the brick and block cavity wall. So we've got a 27.78% increase in our profit as well. And it breaks all of the information down here on the right-hand side. What I can do is I can change the graph type. So I've got a 2D chart, a 3D chart, or a bar chart. But what I can now start seeing is all the information of all my individual build phases and where I'm going to be making my profits as well, which is very important to be able to see, okay, then where I'm going to be making. Now you've got the shallower graphs that is saying, okay, gas connections, we're going to be making 11, 12 quid on this. But again, very Tesco's, but every little helps. Yeah. But when we start looking at our brick and block cavity wall, we've got a profit saying that we should be making £2,060 on this build phase. Now, if something goes wrong, that can then start coming down quite rapidly. For example, there's history of when the founder of this business, HBXL, he had something go drastically wrong with a crane end and messed up quite a few cars going down a road. So again, this can fall into that kind of bracket of covering yourself for anything that can go wrong if insurances aren't covering it, if your inflation isn't covering it, if your profit isn't covering it, if your overheads aren't going wrong, because as you know, it's a very fine line of something very badly happening when it comes to your business, and you want to make sure that you are financially able to deal with those situations.
Yeah, well, that's why it's so important to build in build in the profit. I mean, hopefully you will be covered by everything else that you've already talked about. And incidentally, our MD was absolutely covered under insurance, I should say, with the crane incident. And no, he wasn't driving the crane. It was, I think, you've got to plan for the unknown, and obviously what is happening then is you've got that cushion in the bank, knowing that you're making a true profit on the project. You've got to, a lot of builders don't have pensions lined up. This is, the profit that goes in your bank is your pension. It's what pays for your holidays. It pays for your car. It pays for your kids' shoes. It's kind of not putting too finer point on it. That's what we are trying to help, because we understand that you are family businesses. We understand that you have mortgages, you have time that you're losing out on with your family, with your kids. You aren't going on those holidays with your family, or they're going off a week before you are, because you've got to start mopping up everything that's going on. You probably know guys that have been friends that have lost businesses over very simple situations. I've had a friend that had a body detailing company, and one of his guys crashed the van and it almost crippled his business. There are very fine things when you don't start thinking about these profits and these inflation costs, because if this starts eating away at what you start doing, is that money that you're making, that you're paying yourself for that day wage, and you start feeding that back into a particular job, before you know it, when it comes around to that tax year, you might owe a little bit more than what you were expecting. That could hurt. And then you have to start thinking about, well, okay, what are we actually going to be doing? How do we start going from being cash rich to business rich? And that's a very big difference, whereas a lot of people don't think it is. Whereas you need to think about, okay, then how are we going to be going from maybe just a simple company to a limited company, these steps that you want to be taking, these insurances you want to be taking, these covering aspects. And this is what our software is going to be allowing you to do. But before we look at the contract, and I guess let's go into that now. It's building is a funny business, because there's a lot of money sloshing about, cash in and cash out continuously. Payments from the client, payments and bills from merchants, more, another payment. And it's really quite hard to get a handle on what is the true situation of the bank balance, because there's just a lot of money moving continuously. And then it only takes a couple of unexpected bills, or as you say, something that goes wrong. If you don't build profit into every single project, that you are, excuse my earlier expression, in the doo-doo. But let's look at this contract. Let's look at that.
Yes, one of the things that our software will be able to do is, and you will find this job in there as well, is our contract software. So instead of actually building the contract, I'm just going to show you the individual pages that you're going to be able to look at. Firstly, at the very top here, we've got the contracts that are by law needed to be handed out. So we've got our change of works, cancellation form, notice of the right to cancel and start work now, because your client might say, right, okay, I'm happy for you to just break ground straight away, and they can sign off on this. And at least that way, then they can't turn around and say, what are you doing? There's signed documentation here. But I could just easily click that notice of the right to cancel, click save, just go yes a second. And what we're going to be able to see is straight away is we've got the notice of the right to cancel, and it even tells them where they can find information about this in the contract and why it is there and what dates they have to abide by. Okay, so this is something that they have to deal with. But what the contract will be going through for your benefit are the project details, so the job quote reference.
And let's look at this really important bit here, because I think, you know, obviously we're not going to do a full contract expert demo here, but what we really wanted to highlight is this here: will you requote the price, the job price prior to commencing? And normally speaking, if it's only a couple of months away, people will be saying no. But here, if you've got a job that's starting next year, you know, e.g. 12 months away, you want to hit yes there. And if you hit yes there, then that says, okay, well, how much time before the job is starting do you want to requote the job price? Now, really, in order for the contract to be seen as fair to the consumer, now, I know you'd expect for us as we're on the side of the builder in inverted commas, we are builder focused, we're not consumer focused, not on the client side, but we have to say to you that if you issue a contract which is perceived as unfair under the Consumer kind of Rights Act, it's unenforceable anyway. So what you really want to be doing is not forcing the client's hand. Really, it should be about 90 days before the job starts that you requote, or a push 60 days. So you can change that to 60 days prior to the job commencing. And obviously, if you've then rerun the job using the latest prices in Estimator Express with the latest inflation rates in there, then obviously that will protect you against that 60 to minus 90 days before it starts. And this gives you a really important paragraph, which Matt will show us in a minute, as to explaining to your client that you're going to book the job in, but you are going to have to reprice the job closer to the time. And that is kind of a legal statement. Obviously, if they don't like that price, minus 60 or minus 90 days, then you've obviously got the decision to make to either negotiate something slightly different with the client, perhaps not the full increase, although I'd say not to, because if the inflated price is the inflated price, it is the inflated price, but you might want to come to a different decision. You might change the work slightly with the client, perhaps. Or they can say, no, thank you. And the reason it's got to be the 60, 90 days, as I was saying before, in consumer law, you can't look as the builder, as the professional in this working relationship, be gazumping the client because a better job has come along. You would be seen badly in court. So this is a fair approach, which recognises for you, the building firm, that prices are rising. You do have a requirement to check in on the price closer to the time. And if you choose this option, you have that in writing to your client. So, sorry, Matt, I interrupted.
No, that's absolutely fine. It was my next part anyway.
Sorry,
so we can do that. But one thing that everybody's going to be able to see is that the information is pulled over from the previous job. And that's what we want to emphasize, that once you've gone through Estimator Express and you've saved that job, you can open it up here. And again, it's going to pull in all the relevant information of that particular job. You just say a couple of yes, no questions as to whether or not you want to be governed by a particular authorized representative or not, but that's what your business is there for. We'll then have the site details, when you want to be working, when you don't want to be working, what's going to be provided, the money and the exchange of costs as well, how payments are going to be made, any assumptions, any additional documents on which you want to be adding in there, whether it's plans, whether it's information, whether it's reports, receipts, who your suppliers are. And this is going to be then, and you can say to be defined by a client, but later on, but this could be their supplier being able to say, delivering the bifold doors, they're going to be doing those tests, they're going to be getting it checked off by fencer, these kind of items. And you want to make sure that that is detailed in your quote, so it doesn't come back to you and say, okay, then I thought you were going to be supplying this. You need to make sure that it's in black and white, because again, there's always the story of the cowboy builder, but there's never the story about the cowboy client, and they are around. Who your subcontractors are, again, if the client's going to be providing them, who are they? And then any published contracts as well that you want to be adding in there. But what we can then do is we can then preview that contract between you and your client. So we've got the small works contract, and we can start seeing that we can start going through articles of agreement, contract terms, work documents, and you can start seeing that this is a nice detailed breakdown. Of course, let me just see if I can zoom out here a little bit more, the contract price, and then we can start seeing that we are detailing that we can actually itemize these items as well, and what appendices that you can look at. And all this.
So I guess Blue Peter style, you'd done that before we had then done the work on the job that we were just the Estimator Express job that we were looking at together.
So where there has been a slight change in price,
that would appear there.
That would be appearing here, and you'll be able to see that that would be closer to about £71,000, £72,000.
Yeah.
Okay. But then what we can do is we can start looking at information that's being pulled in about Brexit and COVID-19 pandemics as well. So we understand that there are going to be external factors that can be influencing this contract as well, something that you need to be able to start submitting to your client.
Yeah. So that's really, can I ask you just to scroll up the tiniest bit before we go, and a tiniest bit more, so we can just see the bottom of the previous page. So this is saying the works aren't due to start. So if we've been talking about this being June 22, sorry, that's what you're using this in that scenario. It's just saying we can't fix the price this far in advance with certainty. So the contract's conditional until closer to the time, and it's got that 60 or 90 days. So you then have to inform them of that price closer to the time, and this is all set out. This, if you don't tick that box, this chunk is not on the contract. It just says this is the price. Let's sign it off. But this is really important in these unprecedented times, that you do have this within your agreement. And Contracts Expert does that for you with all the right legal wording and framework to make sure that you're not over-egging it in terms of the Consumer Rights Act, but you are within what would be perceived as fair to the client and fair to your business. Anyway, I'll let you carry on again.
No, not a problem.
I'm interrupting.
Not at all. But then what we can be able to see is we've got signed by everybody on their behalf, and then it will just start detailing the information about the quotes, about the contract, and then we can start seeing signed up by the contractors, the employers as well. And then we can start going through this information, and it will start detailing as to what would happen if they fail to pay for the materials that they are rightfully yours before payment. Okay, so we want to make sure that it's worth the read at the end of the day to find out what your actual rights are as a builder as well. Even if it was something that you weren't happy to go ahead with this contract, just read it for your benefit anyway.
Yeah, if you go down to I think it's about 4.1, which is another important clause in
changes to the works.
It's changes to the works, and if things like legal permissions and all requirements have you've been impacted by COVID, for example, and that you are reasonably allowed and the project, for example, has been extended out, or there's a lack of availability of X or Y, that allows you to make a change to the project. And that also includes, as I say, Brexit, as well as the likes of COVID. So that's really important, that you kind of have that flexibility for things that are beyond your control. Right. But
absolutely.
Cool. So we can see that we've got a really detailed contract.
And yes, we've got a really detailed contract, something that you can sign off on with your client, and you can go to any part of this as well by just clicking on the left-hand side here.
Right. And that there was that you just showed us there, the all those stage payments had kind of had come in.
Absolutely. So we've got the breakdown of costs, fails and milestones as well, what the total costs are going to be. Cancellation contract as well, so they can keep this. This is something that you can hand over to them, so it's going to be printed with this cost. Change of works, how you would like to be notified of these change of works as well, and then notice of the right to cancel. And then contract definitions, so you can then start seeing, and your client can read up on what these terms actually mean, so they can actually be more educated as well. And it's something that we want to make sure that all parties are happy with this contract going forward.
Okay. Cool. So we've seen then, guys, a lot about Estimator Express. We've seen how Contracts Expert is going to protect you in these unprecedented times. So I think we've taken up loads of your time. So I guess what next? I'd like to suggest that you have a demo personal to your business with Matt. or Mark, who's another of our very experienced account managers, knows all of our software tools inside out. So you've got the phone numbers there for them both, or you can go to hbxl.co.uk and you can book a demo online. You can request a trial for the software, or you can just watch some of the videos and explore it a little bit more.
Absolutely. And for those that have already had demonstrations as well, you understand that Mark and I are available for conversations as well. We can go into more detail with these software packages, and or we can talk about purchase as well. Okay, and the different versions that will be right for your business.
Okay, well, I'm going to say, if you want to stop screen sharing, then the guys can see us, so we can say our goodbyes from my home and Matt's home. As you can see, we're all working from home in these COVID times. So thank you very much for all of your time, everybody. A pleasure as always, and we'll see you again soon. So thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Take care. Bye now.
Bye. Bye.